Happy April all. I hope that you had a great Easter and we're already into the month. Hey everyone, I hope you're well playing and making the games that you all love. You're joining me, Principal Mission Designer Max Bears. Pleasure to be having you listening to me, whether it's be evening, morning, or night. This is the start of the month for us, so you know what that means. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. It is about suggesting incredible resources to share with all of you, and just great things to make you think, maybe question some ways to design, and learn from other incredible designers out there, because after all, we do not know everything, and I think it's a great way to give back to others in different ways, and to, really appreciate what they all do. So from me, how many have we got today? We have 5, yes, that's right, 5 resources that I'm going to recommend to all of you to check out for this month.
But first, let's have a quick word from today's sponsor. Today's sponsor is none other than me. What I've done, everyone, and I hope you're excited for this, is I've actually created a level design kind of store. What I've done in this store is put up different kinds of tips and tricks that you can find there, whether that be my actual ebook itself, to that of level design pamphlets focused on different things such as traversal, stealth, breaking into the industry, as well as different talks that I have done which you cannot find anywhere else other than on this store. So if you are looking to improve on your level design skills and processes, then check out the Level Design Store, which will be down in the description below, where there'll be a link to find this. All you need to do is head over to gumroad.com/level design lobby. I hope you like what you see, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts. Thank you, and now back to the show.
Without further ado, let's just jump into the very first one. So this first one is kind of coming from a place where I went to go visit some friends who are game artists. Incredible. Both of them I've worked in, well, I went to uni with both of them, worked with both of them at Ubisoft, and they're off going doing all of their own different things as well, both working on the Call of Duty franchise as well as Star Wars, Wolfenstein, and many other incredible things. But one of the things that we kind of always talk about is the design of products. And I know that may not be something that you think would help with level design, but I think it's a different way of design, right? We've constantly talked about when you're building your portfolio, how web design is different to level design, or designing that of your CV. So I just think it's a fascinating one to really look at these different aspects with, say, that of how others approach their design philosophy, and is there anything we can take away from that? So the very first one is a YouTube video by that of the channel of Some Grey Things called Industrial Design Trends 2024, where he goes through, breaks the year, start off the trends that are selling, that are popular amongst many different aspects, whether that be some sort of chairs, interfaces, elements like that, and then builds a few different examples of his own and kind of talks about a little bit of that. So I think it's a very fascinating one. And just seeing how, if there is a trend there, now it is much more visual, and you interact, for example, with the seat differently to how you're interacting with, say, that of a controller or a level. But I have noticed a trend from that. I know I'm steering off from his video here, but one of the trends that we can talk about is how buttons now are being used a lot more for hold confirmation now. They've always had that, but you're seeing a lot more in menus where you select, and then if you want to confirm something, you hold it down, right? And it's something that we can think about with our own interfaces as well in design. Can we do it where rapidly tapping it does create a different result versus one press, or that of holding it down? So it's a really fascinating one to think of that. And yeah, really great to see him actually go through and try replicate these trends and see which work together, which don't. And yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts if you get a chance to watch it. And that brings us on to resource number 2, because they actually go and sit down in that of British GQ with the Japanese designer Oki Sato, who is a famous architect and product designer as well. for it, and kind of breaking down that of a different approach over in the East. We say that we see a lot of, or when you go into this kind of world of product design, you'll see a lot of Scandinavian and Japanese. You'll see some American. Obviously, Apple has a huge role that's played in design in many different ways. But again, hearing from his opinion, from his kind of view for it, and especially when he's designing different things like that of architecture, as you know, we've recommended architectural books on this podcast before. And again, just hearing a different approach to it, right? What is it that we are trying to learn from them, or can we take away from them and go through a slightly different way for it, team? So those are the first two for it. The first one, again, comes from Some Great Things, which is called Industrial Design Trend, if I can use my words correctly today, team. And the second one is by British GQ, Japanese designer Oki Sato, on his playful approach to design. Now we're going to go into the third one, which I was really excited and really enjoyed reading, and that was Level Design Comparisons FPS versus TPS. This is one of the biggest questions I get asked a lot, especially when I moved from Division over to that of Cyberpunk and thinking about how or what were the differences. And there are quite a few, and sometimes I was not always the best at articulating this, but this example goes through into a lot of different aspects, from that of the camera position and also the field of view, so you can't see as much or you can see more depending on which view you're playing in, and then kind of the gameplay loop. Now, is comparing more of that, say, with the shooters than you would say that of adventure games, really. And again, it was a fascinating one to see, to read, and yeah, it just echoed a lot of my points and the approach of how it is different. You know, one of the big things that I always discuss when people ask me that question for it is the element of when you enter a room. In a third-person room, I feel you could enter into the middle of a room if we put a doorway there, and it would just instantly make sense. We can see a lot more of the surroundings, field of view, and we were much further back and we have a bit more spatial awareness from where we are. Compare that to the elements of first person, where if you stick someone in the middle of a room, they have to look left and right to gather all the information because their field of view is much smaller as well. So there's a lot more of a kind of slowly revealing the information versus being thrown into it, which I always noticed. But they have a lot of great details in here and kind of goes through that of different examples, comparing that of Valorant to Honkai's Star Rail, which I believe it's by the same creators of Genshin Impact, if I remember correctly. And yeah, just talking about those different elements, how do you stage out it as well. So I think there's some really cool aspects that I really enjoyed reading through, and yeah, really articulated a lot of great stuff in there. So really, really good one. Now, before we move on to the fourth recommendation, I actually wanted to talk about, in the previous resource we talked about was what makes a great game designer, and I finished the book. I just kind of wanted to touch back on it for it, and really, really enjoyed it. Now, if you've been in the industry for multiple years and released multiple games, you're probably not going to learn a huge amount from it. But if you're, say, straight out of university, junior, I think there's a lot to take away from it. The reason that I mentioned that, though, for it is, regardless of that, you can really see this man's passion through it, really read it and just come off the page, and I really appreciate that. And we've talked about it constantly as well, like making sure that good communication is always there, and that we have to think not only of how to articulate our words, but how to sell something as well. And I really appreciated that. When I say sell, I don't mean sell a video game, but really when you're trying to convince that of directors or other disciplines to buy in, and different kind of strategies and how you actually approach that aspect. And I really did enjoy it. As I said, near the end, I definitely felt, okay, there's not as much I'm learning from the book, but overall, do recommend. As I said, I'd only started it last week, so I just wanted to give an update from the last episode, team.
At Level Design Lobby, we believe everybody has a story to tell. Hobbyist or student, freelancer or veteran, we made it our mission to unite those who share our passion for creating and developing great games. Thanks to our generous Patreon backers, we've been able to do just that. So if you've already pledged your support, thank you. If not, you too can ensure the future of Level Design Lobby, helping us to create even more exciting content, collaborations, interviews, and much more. with awesome perks and rewards. Whether you're a seasoned professional or just getting started, you're sure to find something for you. Want to share tips, tricks, and advice with passionate, like-minded developers? Our awesome community Discord has you covered. Fancy practicing your level design, creating strong portfolio content, and having fun? Then try our level design weekends. Or perhaps you want to individually discuss your work, hone your skills, or level up your career? Then consider our one-on-one mentorships. If you share our vision, then go to patreon.com/level design lobby for more information and to pledge your support. Thank you.
Yes, number 4 now. This one for me was a great one because I'm a huge fan of psychology of video games. I have been on that show. I listened to it a lot, and obviously read I believe he's released 2 books now, but a huge fan of the first book. I constantly recommend that as well. But this is number 87, or episode 87, which is Emergence and Presence in Video Game Worlds. And this is actually Jamie going through a talk he gave over at, I believe it was a university, and him going through and talking about how is it that we can use different elements like scale, props, in that to create the familiarity for players when they are going through and exploring different video game worlds as well. And how do we keep them present in it, right? It's one thing to make it immersive, but it's another thing to actually make sure that we don't break that aspect as well. And he goes through this. It's a great talk. As I said, I'm a big fan of this podcast. Been listening to this for years. So if you are looking for something more on that, do check that out. I think it's been great to hear more, as I know he took a bit of a break over last year, if I remember correctly, but he's been on a roll this year for it as well. I think it's important for us as well, right? We may not be placing the assets, but we're building the spaces. We've done talks and wrote an article ages ago about that of toilets, right? And creating bathrooms, and I've had other LDs disagree and say it's not important. It really depends on the game you're making, but I do feel that having that realism, that understanding of how did this place operate, how did this place function prior to the player, and that of the puzzle solving or the bullets flying, how was it that people would use it? I think it's a really important question to ask. It's also that of making sure there are no floating props, for it as well, team. But these are all different aspects too for it. So I think it's a really fascinating one, really important to see all of this. And this here is that I've recommended this channel before, but it's a fascinating one by an actual architect, which is a channel called, God, I hope I get this one right as well, Morphologist. Yeah, I believe that's as close as we're going to get. Morphologist, who has done reviews on that of Cyberpunk as well as Star Citizen, because he's a huge fan of Star Citizen as well, where he's actually gone through the ships, architecturally broke it down, same with the space of Night City. But what he's doing here is the comparison between that of, say, Starfield and that of Night City, talking about like the architecture, how do they work, what is the differences, what kind of storytelling do they bring to the space alongside that of the functionality as well, right? So it's always interesting to hear from, like you say, a professional architect, from their perspective, and just how obviously different games operate, right? We are selling different themes, different stories. When you think of Night City, it's much more of a dystopian future in that of a mega city versus, say, Star Citizen, which is much more of a utopia in that where it's much more organic shapes, I would say, versus the more monolithic square structures that we had. If you even look at our mega buildings, how just rectangular they are versus the more curved nature and the fanciness of their buildings. When you think of something like London, you have much more of these wealth in London, right? So it has all these different kind of spaces without the Gherkin, the Shard, versus the elements that we can see. Probably some cities over in Russia. There obviously are some great architecture in Russia. Not what I'm trying to say, but there's the Komi block is very famous with that brutalistic style. So yeah, again, really different perspectives. So I really hope that you've enjoyed this. We'll list off again what actually were the resources. So the very first one goes to a YouTube channel called Some Grey Things, Industrial Design Trends 2024, followed by the interview with that of Oki Sato and talking about his playful designs when he's creating architectures and products. Then we have the discussion and breakdown between that of first person camera perspectives versus third person, and kind of what are the key big differences, mainly focused on shooters. The fourth one is that of the podcast of Psychology of Video Games, episode 87, Immersion and Presence in that of video games, for the final one to be that of an architect compares Cyberpunk 2077 versus Starfield Cities. I hope that you've enjoyed this. I hope that you enjoyed that of these future references as well. If you do have anything you want to share, put them in the comments below, or you can reach me over on Twitter, which is @MaxPairs. Email into the show, leveldesignlobby@gmail.com. And if you do want to support in any shape or form, please head over to patreon.com/leveldesignlobby. Thank you all very much. A great start to April to you all, and I'll catch you all next time.